operate in truth, right? Operate in truth. Tell the truth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Gator Truth Florida Football Podcast. I'm Daniel, and on this episode, we're going to look back at the Gators' 48-20 victory over the Kentucky Wildcats this past Saturday night. And I will say, what started off as a somewhat frustrating game did become a pretty good celebration by the end of the night. I'm not going to lie, if you have not yet, go check out the Twitter post I had where I did, yes, I know the origins of this, but essentially for years after Kentucky beat us against 2018, Cash Daniels famously, and this was on the opening of SEC Nation for years, Cash Daniels, Kentucky player, holds up two water bottles, essentially does a move made famous by one pro wrestler, Stone Cold Steve Austin, holds both water bottles up and pours them on himself. Well, Cormani McClain gets that pick, and I just happen to have about a third full orange and blue Gatorade, and you might see me doing that with the stadium in the background. Go check it out on our Twitter page at Gator Podcast. With that said, definitely, again, fun night. Started off kind of slow, started off kind of frustrating, but obviously picked up from there. Beginning of the game looked like our red zone woes were continuing. Of course, we'll get into several big games had by people. Talked about in the preview, not sure what we're going to see with Kentucky, because this was a team that got blown out by South Carolina, but somehow upset Ole Miss on the road. This was a team that should have beaten Georgia, and yet the week before lost to Vandy by 7. And in this game, we saw a little bit of both. We saw at the beginning of the game, Kentucky, even though they gave us pretty good drives, held us to field goals, and then hits a big play for a touchdown, misses the extra point. And so kind of saw a little bit of good Kentucky. And then pretty much a lot of the second half was the bad Kentucky. And I think, some of that is definitely credit to our players. That's not to take away from our players at all. That's just to say Kentucky's been a crapshoot, and we saw a little bit of it all over on Saturday night. With that said, before we get into talking about the offense, I do want to give a shout out to my friends at Alvarez Lawn Company. And Alvarez Lawn Company, for those of you who don't hear me talk about them every episode, they are a lawn company that operates in the Central Florida area. If you need something done after Hurricane Milton or have any yard projects that you need done, just give them a call or text for a free quote at 407-490-2617. You can also reach out to them at alvarezlawncompany@gmail.com. Once again, call or text them for a free quote at 407-490-2617. And also email them at alvarezlawncompany@gmail.com. Alvarez Lawn Company, building plans that work for you. And so let's go ahead. Let's get into the offense from Saturday night. Of course, the Gators putting up 48 points on the Wildcats, which was amazing. And can't talk about the points without talking about some great defensive plays. Of course, 7 of those points come on a pick six, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And Devin Moore getting a good pick, returning it down to about the 1, and we punch it in. With that said, just going through a little bit of stats, DJ Lagway, 7 for 14, 259 yards, 18.5 yards per attempt, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. But I will take that 1 interception if I'm getting, 18.5 yards per attempt. However, if we want to break it down into yards per completion, you're talking about over 30 yards per completion, about 3.5, maybe a little bit more. And then, of course, 20 more yards by Aiden Warner on his only pass of the game to get the Gators to 279 yards passing on the night, which is very, very good against this Kentucky defense, who I did say beforehand, and I'll stick by it, that this Kentucky defense was probably the best defense that Florida has faced, possibly the best one that the Gators will face. They were 12th in the nation coming into the game, only giving up 162.2 yards, and we got 279. So again, good game by that. Some of that, I'm sure, was Kentucky wanted to play at our tendencies of hitch routes and kind of did early, had success. But then DJ Lagway said, forget that. I'm going to take shots deep. I've been saying for a while now, I will take a lower completion percentage than 78% if that means the passes are getting downfield, getting deep, and that's going to open up holes for the running game, and that's going to make the offense more dynamic. Exhibit A being this game, only 7 completions, which is kind of shocking, but those 7 completions, again, massive, 18.5 yards per attempt. Hit some very deep balls, some very good balls. Unfortunately, they didn't end up in touchdowns, whether it's, tackles or one play we stumbled allowing a tackle. But either way, game-changing throws by DJ Lagway. But talking about opening up the run game, Jadan Baugh, 22 carries, 106 yards, and 5 touchdowns, and averaging 4.8 yards per carry. And when you're talking about a guy had a 1-yard touchdown run, which will bring down that average, that is a very, very good day. Heck, still finished with 4.8 yards per carry. Also, DJ Lagway, 10 runs, 46 yards, and 4.6 yards per carry. Jacoby Jackson, 9 carries, 44 yards, 4.9 yards per carry. Gators end up overall with 197 yards on the ground, and that ends up with 476 yards total for this offense. A great, great output for the Gators against the Wildcats. Now, I'm not going to pretend that this Wildcats team is, a team that's going to go compete with Georgia for the East, as some wanted to make it out to be after we lost to them last year. In fact, I'm not sure, and I said this in preview, I'm not sure that this team becomes bowl eligible now. As I said, that I believe this game was crucial to both the Gators and Kentucky while seeking bowl eligibility. Not saying they can't get there, but they have a lot tougher road now. However, most of that is due to Kentucky's offense incompetence rather than their defensive competence. I do want to throw that out there. The Gators putting up 476 yards is terrific against Kentucky. I mean, Lagway hitting all sorts of guys deep. I mean, let's go ahead. Let's look at this. Badger, 3 receptions, 148 yards. That is 49.3 yards per catch. That's insane. If he doesn't kind of lose his feet a little bit, that is over 50 yards per catch, long of 58, and he would probably have a touchdown. Either way, 148 yards. That is sensational for 3 catches. And Kamir DK, 67 yards, averaged 33 yards per catch, 33.5, long of 44. Eugene Wilson got a catch for 40. Spirito, of course, got that catch from Aiden Warner for 20 yards, and Arliss Boardingham getting 4 yards. So plenty of explosiveness. Normally I'd make a comment like I wish I could have seen more Aiden Mizell, and that is true. I think he had less than 10 snaps and definitely deserves more time. Showed he's flashy, but you can't really argue with the success that these guys have had, and Mizell was in there on some of these big plays as a decoy, and you can't hit everybody all the time, and there's no complaints to be had when you're putting up a terrific game like this. So kudos to the Gators, definitely going over the average passing yards per game. For those that are new, I have talked about how a lot of our average passing yards per game was really boomed on that Samford game, and how most games we've actually been well under that and seen the average come down and down, but most of it being anchored high by the Samford game. Not in this case, went the over there, and again against a great defense. And so lots of good things going on. And anyways, also running game, I mentioned the passing game and how they were 12th and how we obliterated their 162 average. Well, in the run game, they were 10th in the nation, 89 yards per game. And of course, we more than doubled that. So I want to give a shout out. Offensive line did a great job. I will say in the red zone, again, beginning of the game, there were some things that were questionable. Definitely getting 2 field goals off the first 2 drives made us have a here we go again feeling, but that was not the case. The Gators came alive, turned it around, and then really made it kind of a party in the swamp in the second half. Definitely good that we got 24 points in the second quarter. Without looking up, I can probably tell you that's in the top 10 or top 5 quarters in Billy Napier's time as a Gator coach, as they're playing games where we've not even scored 24. So that definitely goes there. And I think if you change it to FBS opponents, that number gets higher. And so with that said, I know I've not said a whole lot, but also a lot that this was a great offensive performance. Definitely enjoyed it. And I think a lot of what made it possible is you hear me every week, those who have been listening. And if you're first time joining us, thank you for joining us. But I always say we need that downfield passing game to open up that running game. And again, once we start hitting on those deep passes, that running game also came alive and we put up 48 points. So good on us also taking advantage of, interceptions, getting it down to the 1 and punching the ball in. Lots of good things for this. I will say, real quick, speaking of interceptions, DJ's interception, again, not bothering me. I'll take an interception. I'll take a lower point if I know that our expected value is higher because we're taking shots. And that was just the case. I don't know if it's a miscommunication on the route or what, but DJ definitely throws a post, and I put it in, I believe, is the Respect Our Decision Facebook chat. I said immediately after I go, DJ just threw a post. I don't know if that's what, DK was supposed to be running, or if he was supposed to go to the outside or Badger, whichever one it was. If he threw the wrong route or if whatever, but I'll take those miscommunications as the point. A, he's a true freshman. B, you take enough chances, you're gonna win some, and those are much bigger wins than going behind the line, letting Kentucky, essentially only have to patrol 10 yards deep, if not fewer. So good on us for sure. And with that said, before we get on to the defense, let's give a shout out to my friends at GatorChatter.com. And of course, lots of fun at Gator Chatter. Currently, I believe I'm 3rd in the pick'em and still alive in Survivor somehow. Although this week it is a murderer's row, and at least 2 teams I would have picked, I had already picked this season, and you can only pick once per year. So with that said, lots of fun going over there. I've joked around on here about that Napier firing imminent thread. Don't worry, it is somehow still going strong. Of course, how much of it's talking about firing is not really there at this point. 245 pages. Go check it out at GatorChatter.com, your Florida Gator sports bar. And so let's talk about the defense. And I mentioned coming into the game, Kentucky probably the worst offense that we faced. They were ranked 115th, 321.7 points per, or yards per game, 168 through the air, 153 on the ground, good enough for 121st in passing, 71st or 75th, in the run department. The Gators held them below their average passing. Brock Vandergriff, 12 for 26, 165 yards, 6.3 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown, which of course was their big play of the game, which 45 yards to Barry Brown on a flea flicker, and then 2 interceptions, both off the hands of Kentucky players. But you know what? How many times have we seen those balls pop up and the Gators not get them? It was great to see us take advantage. And again, talked about Devin Moore, gets one of those picks off the hands and takes it the other way out at the 1 or down at the 1. And then Jadan Baugh punches it in for one of his 5 touchdowns on the game. And then Kentucky brings in their backup when it looks like not much is going on. I've not really seen this before. A 0.1 QBR. He was 0 for 6, including an interception, which of course was a pick 6 by Cormani McClain. And we'll talk about him just a little bit more in a second. But the Gators holding Kentucky under their passing average of 168 to 165. And then as far as rushing, Kentucky did go a little bit, or no, actually they're under. My bad. Looked at the wrong number. Held them to 146 yards on the ground. And Brock Vandergriff, I want to point out this one, 8 carries for 33 yards. I'd said in the preview that their quarterback was Vandergriff is a lot like Graham Mertz, and that you're not going to ever mistake them for a dual threat quarterback. But if given the opportunity, he can pick up yards, and he did. Early on, I believe he had an 11-yard scamper, and of course had a few more decent runs. But at the end of the game, great job by the Gators. Their top running back had 10 carries, 39 yards, 3.9 yards per carry. I talked about one of our keys for the game, of course, is to make Vandergriff beat you through the air. He did not. I talked about you're going to have Jason Marshall, who unfortunately went out injured. You're going to put him on Dane Key, kind of keep him down. Dane Key ends up with 4 catches, 48 yards, no touchdowns. But that's to be expected. Barry Brown, I said, could do some stuff, but he'll probably get 1 or 2. He's got a low amount of catches, and sure enough, he has to have it on a trick play where he got the 45-yard flea flicker. And, well, it happens. Touchdown. Wasn't happy at the time. Shouldn't be happy about it. But if it takes a trick play for us to give up a touchdown, then, it happens sometimes. The other team makes plays too. But outside of that, no one got it above 2 receptions. Really, really shutting down that Kentucky offense like I hope we would. And it was good to see us stop the run game after years of our failure to stop the Kentucky run game. And I've got to shout out before I get into individual performances, and that has to be the shout out of, I believe, a big turning point in this game was when we got the goal line stand. Of course, I believe that was right after we threw our pick, and then team comes on the field, and what happens? Kentucky gets the ball at their 10. They run it for 4, 3rd and 2, runs for 1, 4th and 1, get the stop, and we get the ball. And what do we do after we get the ball? 98 yards, 4 plays, touchdown. So right there, I think is a turning point in that game. At that point, it was 13 to 6. If they go 13-13, the feel of this game is different. Maybe we don't, ride that momentum. And something Florida has struggled under Billy Napier is when you get momentum, really taking advantage of it and trying to ride it on to some scores. Well, in this case, it's only a 7-point game. we get a goal line stop, and then we go 98 yards in 4 plays, and heck, 98 yards, 4 plays, touchdown, and then right after that, well, we get our second interception and take it, and then now it is a 3-score game just like that, and it rides off the momentum of that goal line stop. So again, I can't say enough. For me, that is the moment that changed this game, helped ignite the crowd, helped ignite the offense, and really, really changed the game so that the Gators went and blew out the Wildcats by 28 points. So talking about some individual games by the defenders, and Bridges, 10 tackles, and one thing I want to say is he had a nice tackle where he came up from a safety position on a 4th down. Kentucky throws it, behind the stick, something I hate when Florida does. And what did we do? Bridges came down, secured the tackle, and that was the second 4th down stop for the Gators. Of course, I talked about he had the pick. Unfortunately, when he got his pick, which was the first pick of the game, we threw a pick shortly after, so it kind of nullified it. But again, I'm glad to see a player step up and get one of these tip ball picks that we haven't really seen from the Gators too much. And so got to do that. Jack Pyburn, he is everywhere. He had 8 tackles, but it's not just the tackles that I want to shout out, of course. He's got a motor. He's blown up several blockers that really messed up Kentucky's plans. Guy that I've been really, really high on, especially since spring game, not this year in 2024, but 2023, where instead of the post-spring game signing like they did this year, they essentially let season ticket holders onto the field, and you could stand at the 50 after the spring game and kind of watch the players interact with their families. But Pyburn and Big Dez were the two I definitely remember coming over to the crowd and actually taking pictures, shaking hands, high fives, whatever. And, I've seen him play with a high motor. So I'm always happy to see he's got more opportunities. Billy Napier talked about, I think it was after the Mississippi game, talked about how we need to make some player adjustments. Some players possibly need to play more. And he specifically mentioned Jack Pyburn in that. And of course, first 2 games, I can tell you, Pyburn got like 12, 14 snaps. He's been getting 25, 30 snaps since then. And of course, a lot of people talk about how much better the defense looks. Now, some of that I do think comes down to facing offenses like Kentucky that are 115th, or Tennessee, who right now, they beat Alabama, but their offense is averaging like 21 points in the SEC. However, part of that is because Florida's playing better. So I think both things can be true. Florida's playing better because they're playing guys like Bridges and Pyburn more, who weren't playing so much in the first few games. And I think it's also a combination with bad offenses. However, and both those things can be true. However, there are times we've let bad offenses abuse us in the Billy Napier era. So even more reason to give these guys a shout out. Devin Moore, of course, a big pick that really blew the game open. 2 pass deflections as well. TJ Searcy gets the Gators' lone sack of the night. George Gums had a great pass deflection on, I believe it's the second 3rd down by Kentucky. And I'll be honest, I didn't realize he deflected at first. I turned to the person I was with. I go, oh my gosh, I think we just got lucky that they, tipped it, or they didn't come down on 3rd down for the second drive in a row because guys were open. But no, on that play, Gum somehow came out of nowhere, knocked the ball away. And that's why, despite being in the stadium, I like to rewatch the game to see exactly, because there are things that your perspective in a stadium may see that they don't see on TV, and there are things that you may see on TV that you don't realize or change it to what you see on the stadium. Kind of like also there's a touchdown that Baugh had where I thought he was called short by, by losing momentum. And meanwhile, they called it a touchdown. And I'm like, I don't think he got in. And I've got the video. I should upload it to YouTube where I actually have the play on video. I didn't think he got in. However, someone else, I guess the reporter, photographer, same play, has a great angle of video. It's not a TV video, but you can clearly see him before he's down reach across the line with the ball. Meanwhile, there are people that are watching on TV that are tweeting, he definitely didn't get in, but hey, play stood. And then you see this other angle from someone who's not a TV camera, obviously, and you're like, oh my gosh, he did get in. Great job. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about, Gumps coming out of nowhere. I think it was a, drop pass, and then here we are. We had a fantastic defensive play. Jason Marshall getting injured, unfortunately, came back out in the second half in a sling. But a guy I really want to shout out, hinted at it earlier, the game sealing pick six from Cormani McClain. For those that are not familiar with McClain was brought to UF after initially during his recruitment, one of the top recruits in the nation 2 years ago, commits to UF and then basically makes it seem like he's committing to UF, then goes to Miami, and through some other hijinks ends up at Colorado last year. Dion basically kicks him out of Colorado, talks about how lazy he is, and gets such a bad reputation. No one wants to touch him. Florida brings him in, not as a scholarship athlete, but as a walk-on, and pretty much says, you've got to earn your scholarship with us. And you know what? The kid's been working hard and comes in and makes a big play. And I don't care if it was Kentucky's backup quarterback. It's a great story for a guy who basically has done a lot of not great stuff, to be honest, whether it was how he ended up at Colorado and how he treated the Florida coaching staff with his commitment or things like that. But to go and then basically become a pariah in college football and then work his way in and pretty much get this big moment with a game sealing pick. That's just great. Hopefully he continues on the straight and narrow and ends up living up to the hype he had. I mean, we're talking, this guy was a top 5, I believe, top 10, definitely recruit 2 years ago. And then was such a pariah, no one really was going after him. And Florida said, you can come here as a walk-on, and then makes a big play. And we might be seeing more from him. Billy's talking about how he's on the scout team and he's picking off what we can assume is the first teamers all the time. But then the question is, if he's doing so well there, how come he's not getting more reps? My argument with that is when you've got Jason Marshall playing as well as he's played and a Devin Moore playing as well as he's played, well, it's kind of hard to crack that lineup sometimes. But with that said, made the most of his chances, gets that pick six. That's why I made sure to put him on the thumbnail for this episode. But definitely lots of cool stuff going on in that Kentucky game. And with that said, it was a fun one. And now we go into the meat of our schedule, and we're going to really see, has this defense turned the corner? How much of it was turning the corner? How much of it was, facing generally lackluster offenses that have QBs that have been struggling? And of course, again, UCF, KJ Jefferson has been struggling. They started someone else this past week, Ja'Cory Brown. No one's going to confuse Nico as not from Tennessee as not struggling. And then you've got Vandergriff, who is part of the 121st going into the game passing offense in the nation. So we're going to see what it looks like with better quarterbacks coming up, but we've done a good job so far. Maybe this is kind of like how you play cupcakes to build up for better teams on your schedule. We face these struggling teams. We pass these tests overall, and I would say Tennessee, the defense passed the test, shutting them out in the first half. And And then now it's time for the real test, and we're going to see how that goes. And hopefully the offense keeps up with their end. With that said, everybody, thank you all for listening. And as always, and we're going to find it. And as always, go Gators.